I'm here on behalf of Qyrus to discuss why we need to rethink the API quality in the age that we all are living in right now, which is pretty much everything that we hear and say and do and talk these days is all about AI. And I'm sure many of the talks that we're attending and the talk that is going next in the next room as well is about AI. So, but one of the things that we fundamentally keep missing, and in this all the buzz about AI, is whatever AI we are using today is still being accessed through an API. So APIs are still necessary. It's not like they have vanished. So all the AI consumption that we do is essentially running through an API. So hence API testing is as relevant as it has ever been, and even in the age of AI. So what this essentially means is if it might look like you're using AI, but at the ground level, at a transaction level, what you're essentially doing is calling APIs which are fetching you whatever, right? So it's like playing a question answer game with AI, and that question answer game is basically facilitated by some APIs, right? So the rate limiting, the throttling, the security, the performance, the functionality, everything is still as it is, and there has not been any change even in the age of AI. So what this also means is if the APIs that you have built or you're using, if they fail, then AIs fail. And then as we all know right now, most of the businesses are planning to get powered with AI. So if AIs fail, then the businesses fail as well. So, and this is something, what we from a quality space always want to watch out for. So which is what are the risks that exist and what are the risks that we'll have to cover for. In other words, that is exactly why we do testing, right? So hence, this becomes more important than ever, even in the age of AI, no matter how much is the noise about AI out there. But given that, if you see, despite knowing this fact and despite every developer out there, and again, I might be like an outlier here because I see many people coming in from the developer background. But bear with me because this is equally applicable for all your developers as well. So if you look at it, although the way API testing has been done so far is predominantly driven by developers, but what we as a product, as a platform, the way we think about API testing is essentially where we want more people to be part of this layer. Because as I said, whether even in the age of AI, since all the AI is also getting access through APIs, so it's important that anyone who is looking at app quality post everything is built and deployed, they also have to be part of, towards the left of where they are today, where it's no longer about waiting until the applications gets deployed and everything gets tested using UI, but instead it should be more around how can I catch something towards earlier part of the overall life cycle, and especially when we use AI in the current sense through these APIs. So basically API testing, as I said, is no longer an option. So it is something that is more existential. But still, when you think of it, most of my folks, which is the QA folks, are still relying on UI-based testing. So our objective and our intent as a platform and as a company is to make sure that we get more and more participation into the AI ecosystem. Now, as part of, that's essentially why we launched what we call as QAPI. It's Qyrus API. And for us to understand where we come from, so we need to understand who we are as a platform. So first of all, Qyrus is an overall platform. It's a SaaS platform for all things testing. So web applications, APIs, mobile applications, desktop apps, you might have data, ETL validation. So pretty much everything under the sun, you can basically test using Qyrus. Now, what we are here today, as the title of the event states, is we are only zooming into one aspect of it, which is the API part of it, right? So, and that's what we did. We pulled out the API testing capability of the overall platform called Qyrus and turned that into a platform that you all can use for all your quality purposes. So we are not restricting it only to the testing community. However, our intent has been to increase the participation in the API testing process from all the quarters and not just from developers as it happens today, right? So we want more people with functional knowledge to come in and do API testing. Now, when you look at it, this is how our end-to-end testing looks like in Qyrus. So all those blocks that you see are essentially tests. So we can basically run tests from, you can start a test on a mobile app, then somebody creates an order, that order gets sent to a next test, which is an API test, which can then go to a web test. Then it can call a database, go to database layer, check something, and so on and so forth, right? So that's essentially how this is how an end-to-end test looks like. But what powers this, are the APIs in the backend, and the ones that we have circled today is one of the larger workflows that you can test when it comes to Qyrus. So let's zoom into that, where we are focusing on what we can do as far as API testing is concerned, and we can explore a few aspects and of what is important. How does it feel like in the age of AI to kind of take care of software quality, and also how easy it is for you and your teams essentially, and especially your testing teams, if you're all developers here, to get them into the fold and have them do a lot of API testing as opposed to the one that, as opposed to whatever, in shape or form they do it today, right? So, hence what we are essentially trying to do here is to make testing of APIs everyone's problem and not just the developer's problem, right? Or not just the QA's problem. It should be something that should be applicable to, to everybody. So, and despite this, and again, these are some of the metrics that we always see. So APIs are, we live in what is called as API economy. So I'll not stress more on this. But we still see, and these are well-respected research that has come out, which says, most of the most of the failures today can be traced back to the APIs, and only a very small fraction of large-scale testing that happens across many enterprises actually focuses on API testing and end-to-end API testing. So which means that majority of the focus is happening on the UI side of things, right? And that's exactly what we want to change. Now, not just that. So we are entering into the space where, the cursors of the world and the co-pilots of the world, VS Code, anything that you can think of, is essentially doubling the amount of code that is getting written. Now, from a developer perspective, it might be very simple. So, if you look at it simple ways, if you had one sprint and you put out one version of a particular API of a particular app, then we are now looking at having multiple APIs, multiple versions of the same API built in a single day and thrown over to testing, right? But while you have all achieved the velocity through these tools, but have the testing teams adapted to this? Are they prepared to test 3 versions of your code in a single day, as opposed to testing one version of your code in a particular sprint, which is, let's say, 4 or 5 days of testing? And this is only going to go higher and higher, right? And it's not just that. And we categorize them into the following. So one is what we call as the code volume explosion. So the amount of code getting written itself is doubling a lot. What it also means is there are more PRs getting raised, which means there's more review that needs to happen as you write more code. And one of the things, and I'm sure anyone who is a developer, anyone who's used some sort of AI to build code or write code today will kind of understand that most of the times today AI, the maturity of some of these models is so good that it will, at the first pass itself, make you experience or do something that is more end-to-end in nature, which makes you give this, or which makes you think that the end-to-end app is working. And it does work. It's not like it doesn't, but what this also means is that the bugs that are coming out are very subtle in nature. So you can't just cursory look at something like go log into app, click some few things and then say everything is done and you can throw it over, while some developers can afford it. But what we're essentially saying is, because the models get better, the bugs are getting more and more subtle. So they're going inside, they're living in the edge cases, they're not kind of appearing on the surface. Now finally, as I just mentioned, that it's not, it's the current folks or the current setup or the current processes that we have in QA are not sufficient to deal with this kind of volume. And that's essentially where you need something that can match the pace of this AI development and not at the risk of losing out on quality and losing out on the coverage, and at the same time it should not be like you're losing out on the speed as well, right? So how do we combine all this? How do we bridge this? And essentially what we call, and finally one other thing, like when you look at it from an AI perspective, we talk about everything that AI does. We say it's like a non-deterministic system, right? So you ask the same question to AI thrice, while the facts of the response might be right, but when you actually see the way the answer is written is in 3 different ways. right? But the answer is right. It's not like the answer is not wrong. Ask the same question thrice, it comes back with 3 different ways. Now, if you look at how testing is typically done, you always write an expected versus actual, right? What do we write in assertion? So if I pass this and I should get something back, you know this beforehand. So hence you write the expected versus actual, and we say if both of these pass, or both of these are same, then we say the test is passed. If they're not, then the test is failed. Now, if there is an AI-powered application that is running behind the scenes, you don't know beforehand how is it going to respond. Then how are you going to write the tests? What are you going to write in the expected result? So you need something that is more dynamic, and this is this is the non-determinism part of AI. And the question that we all have to ask, if you're from a QA, ask it yourselves. But if you're a developer, think about it as to how is your testing team actually dealing with something like this, where are they writing these tests in a way that it expects everything to be deterministic, where they know beforehand what is expected to actual, or are they writing it in such a way that it can deal with the non-determinism of AI? That's something I think this is a massive problem when it comes to, at least, it is already a problem in many cases. If you're building bots, if you're building RAG kind of applications, it's already a problem. And it's only going to amplify further because most of the systems will be powered with AI. Now, and we kind of look at it like this, right? So, and again, I'm taking the side of the QA. Now, in this case, all the developers out there have all these different tools, right? Now, what is it how will this scale be balanced now? Because while you guys are building so much code, you guys are building so many applications in no time, but is the QA side of it equally fast, right? Is the key question that we are trying to answer. And let's take a look at like how we, as in the platform called QAPI, the platform called Qyrus, is kind of dealing and helping some teams out in order to deal with it. And again, these principles are something that are, I would say, agnostic. You can apply these principles even if you're not on the platform per se. Now, what I'll go through in the next few slides, and also, by the way, we are running a workshop tomorrow. So you want to experience all this live, you can always join the workshop at 11 a.m. Now, so what we kind of broken the whole testing down into simple things. So we want to import from wherever you are, right? So you might be on a Postman collection, you might be having Swagger specs, you might have not have anything, but just want to go and manually configure this. You can do that. You can run functional tests. You can run performance tests out of the same thing. You can use AI to generate assertions. And one of the things that we've done, we have consciously kept the code aside here, because what we see is many people who are very good from a functional angle are not equipped to come and build API tests by either writing JavaScript or whatever is their preferred programming language, or even if they don't know, coding per se, right? So that's kind of how it is. So you bring your specs, use AI to generate the assertions, pass the data, run it. Once you have the functional test, you can turn the same test into a performance test. Then you can turn them into what we call as process tests, where it is like end-to-end integration testing, and also do a performance on that, right? And also there is the CI integration and all that stuff that we all know. Now let's look at some of these things where we say, so how are we running this? Right, so here you can see that we are importing a Swagger doc, and if it is hosted, or if it is your own application, or if you have not hosted it, you can always upload the file. It will list on all the APIs that you have, and then you can select whatever you want. There can be everything, and then once that happens, it will populate all the APIs or the details, and you can quickly go and preview it, quickly run this and see what is the response. Then you can use our AI to generate assertions. So you just click on it, it knows the request and response. So it's going to build the values or the test cases based on whatever was the request and response. You add that to your test here. So you can see it has built across headers, body, JSON path, schema, all of that stuff. And once that happens, you can then go and then bring it in, add it to the test cases, as you can see. And then you run it, and once you run it, you can see that it will ask, do you want to run a functional test? Do you want to run a performance test? Or you want to run, functional and a performance test, right? So that's one. The next thing what we do is essentially, So then what we can then do is turn the same test into performance, like we spoke about. And then we can turn the same tests into, what we call as process tests. Now, process tests, as we all know, everything works in isolation, but when you combine everything together is when things start breaking. So what we do here is like the same tests that you build, you can drag them, those APIs onto the canvas, and then connect them, right? And what we have done here is every API is turned into a card, and there is inputs and outputs. So we have consciously kept it simple. We call it inputs and outputs. So basically, what does an API take and what does it send out? So once you have that, you can then keep plumbing the data across all this and then run this whole work process from a functional perspective as well as from performance perspective, right? So now all this, if you see, one of the key things that we're looking at is coverage and speed. It's very easy to import it, use AI, generate the test, connect it, and then start running it. So getting from 0 to 1 is extremely easy so that we can get a lot of people onboarded into API testing while you're today only doing the functional testing part of it, right? So the next part that we look at is also the flow. Once the flow is done, you can obviously summarize it. You can use AI like you used for test generation as well. And all of this, right, you might say your testers might not even know what are the APIs getting called. So for that, we have a discovery engine that sits on the browser. So let's say they are doing some manual testing. It is automatically sniffing all the relevant APIs, and it intelligently filters that. It doesn't take everything under the sun, but only picks what is relevant, and then that can be imported into the projects, right? And all of this we are going to see in our workshop tomorrow. Now, so all of these things, like from a performance standpoint and all of that, are something that something that we do, right? Like as a user, I have to sit in front of the machine, do all this stuff. Now the question is, we spoke about scale, we spoke about dynamic responses, non-determinism, so on. So how can we then do all of this stuff only using agents at the developer level itself? And that's essentially what we have looked at across the board. So as a platform, we have around 34 agents, which do different things. Now what we are doing in order to kind of balance that scale is whatever we just saw, what we as humans do as part of the platform, can we directly give that to AI to do it? I mean, that's where our framework called SEER comes into picture. So which stands for sense, evaluate, execute, and report. So what we do here, and I'll just play this, and all of this is something we can also demonstrate to you on the booth. Now here is an application like a classic e-commerce. So where you configure all the tests that you've written on Qyrus like all of this happens inside GitHub, let's say. GitHub is our source code control of choice. So we configure it in actions. What it does is the first thing, it senses what are the changes that all developers are doing, right? Whatever it is. So once a PR is raised, so we assess the change assess the change in the sense, what is the code change, which part, and so on. Assess that happens from our agent perspective. So we have an API call that happens, which sends the payload. We assess the change, and then we say what are the tests that need to be written and run in order to validate that change. One is it looks at existing tests and says, if there are existing tests, great, I'll run it. But if not, then I'm going to build these tests in real time, run them, and then go back and report those issues directly to whoever has raised or whoever has done that change. So you see, now we don't need the pre-written expected versus actual. What we're essentially doing is dealing with all of this. I mean, there are hundreds of developers doing multiple changes in a day, then the agents are always active, right? So here we are only using 4 agents out of the 30 odd agents that we have, which are continuously doing it, and it assesses the change, builds the test, runs the test, and reports it. So you can close the QA loop at the developer level itself. So by the time, and again, we are not saying either or. I'm not saying testing team should not run tests. They can do it. They can come to our platform, everything that we just saw. But what we're also doing is offering all these capabilities as an SDK so that you can either configure it in your GitHub Actions or you can do it. And you can see there's a lot of explainability. You can see we tell what is the criticality of the build, what is the stats, and so on and so forth. So that's here for you, right? So what, in essence, what we're saying is, one, we're making API testing extremely easy and simple so that everyone can participate with AI, generate tests, and run end-to-end single. And then also for developers who can stitch all this together inside their GitHub Actions, and that way you can also continuously run this and deal with non-determinism of AI, right? With that, we strongly feel it will balance the scale because now you have infinite number of testers that are available for you, right? So we are, as I said, we are running a workshop tomorrow. You can experience all this, and then we also have a raffle. You can try this and get a chance to win the Ray-Ban meta classes as well, right? So with SDK and ease of API testing, I think a lot of you can directly get into API testing with minimal effort as possible, right? So that's all I had. Thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you, Amit. That was perfect timing with the Ray-Ban picture and giveaway. Any questions? We can take one or two questions. Yes.
So my question is, as a part of a pipeline, do you integrate with Jenkins?
Yeah, so we integrated Jenkins, GitLab, GitHub, Azure DevOps, pretty much all the popular ones out there. Yeah, I think there's one there.
So is it smart enough to handle the calls by screen scrapping that we usually do by browser?
Yeah, see, the discovery agent is something that can sit in the DevTools, and it can. So I don't understand if you're trying to scrape the APIs by scraping, or you're talking about you're scraping for what?
Like we have sort of authentication journey, and we need to automate that by API, not
Right.
by UI.
Right.
So we need to do screen scrapping
Perfect.
and just analyze what APIs, what cookies,
Exactly.
headers.
Yeah, this extension that you can search for Qyrus API discovery, that's available for free on Web Store. You can go download it and you can try it yourself. Yeah, whatever operations you do on UI, you can fetch it, and you can also add filters and stuff like that. So if you're looking for something very specific, you can filter them as well. So yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, one last question.
So you did mention about the web testing, right? So
Yeah.
this Qyrus will also handle the auto healing, something like when I run my test. So let's say due to some selectors, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
So how does this Qyrus is going to handle that?
So we consciously kept the web part apart, but since you asked it, I'll answer. So auto healing, yes, we can do it, but I think we've gone kind of beyond that. So some of the agents that we spoke about also go run the tests on your behalf, which do not rely on locators. So even if your ID changes, whatever changes, it really doesn't matter because the agents can pick up like any minor changes and so on. So auto healing, yes. I think slowly we'll start moving away from auto healing because it's much easier to run with agents. Although it is expensive today, but it is much easier to do it like that because when you're imagine when you come up with tests on the fly because of whatever changes are happening, you would want to build that test in a way that is easier and faster for the agents to run as opposed to how we look at it. But as I said, short answer, auto healing, yes. But I don't think that will run for longer because agents have found better ways of running tests today.
Okay, one true last question.
Thanks for this. I think we'll get more to see in the workshop tomorrow.
Sure.
We have a quick question. So the demo which you have done is based on the code coverage, and then you're doing a test cases.
Right.
How do you deal with the BDD approach?
See,
the business test cases also gets converted in Qyrus?
Right. So it's not code coverage per se. So what we are essentially doing is we index, once you make it part of our action, we have context of your code, and we, as I said, whatever I showed, we primarily do it for Java Spring Boot and Python REST API. So our agents only know these two languages, and Node.js. So our agents only know these two languages for now. What we are essentially doing is whenever the code change happens, we have an ability to understand the change, whatever change has happened, and what is the impact of that change on all the APIs that exist in your project or in your repository. So, and then try and build the test then we ask a question, are the tests that you or we as humans have built, is it sufficient to validate that change? If the answer is yes, we go run them. If not, then we build new tests on the fly and run them, and if there is any failure, we go and report the issues back. Now, if you look at the BDD side of things, right? So that's something that we can do where we build the test part, like the codeless way of building the tests. We can always import that and then turn them into those tests. So we do have converters which can take care of it.
Well, thank you, Ameet, for all the practical responses, questions, and demo.
Thank you.
Big
Thanks
round of
a lot.
applause to Ameet.